Echoes of arrogance. The Galactic Alliance Hall of Peace was anything but peaceful. Ambassadors from over 70 species crowded the chamber, holographic displays flickering as representatives argued, postured, and mocked. In the center of it all stood Ambassador Lin Jae-soon of Earth, tall, calm, and utterly unwelcome. "Your weapons," drawled the Threx Dominion delegate, a glistening quadruped with bioluminescent ridges along its spine, "are laughably obsolete. Kinetic projectiles? Explosives packed with chemical propellants? How quaint!" Ripples of laughter danced through the assembly. Lin's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. "You are a Death World species," the Threx ambassador continued, "yet your war machines belong in a museum. We employ photon warheads, gravity disruptors, and waveform extinction fields. You wield tubes that throw rocks." More laughter. Lin slowly set a small holoprojector on the table and tapped it. The image that bloomed in the air was grainy, recorded on analog film, not even digitized. It showed a long, heavy cannon, angular, scarred, grim, being loaded by sweaty human soldiers under canvas nets in a muddy field. "Gentle beings," Lin said, "this is the M198 155 mm towed howitzer, introduced in the late 20th century. A relic, by your standards." The Threx delegate sneered. "Yes, exactly our point." Lin zoomed the feed. The camera shook as the cannon fired, spitting flame. In the distance, a distant hillside vanished in a geyser of dirt and fire. The thunder echoed seconds later. No energy signals to detect. No shields to counter. Just mass, velocity, and mathematics. It does not ask your permission to kill. He let the silence hang for a moment. "The colony on Altair 9 has requested Earth's assistance. We will defend it with whatever tools we have. I suggest you reconsider your assumptions." Without waiting for a reply, Lin turned and walked out. Altair 9, edge of Threx space. Smoke curled from the charred husks of orbital defense drones. The colony's outer perimeter lay shattered, its railguns silenced, its energy shields overloaded. The skies glowed orange as the Threx fleet descended like a falling storm. From behind a shattered hilltop, Sergeant Rook surveyed the damage. "Looks like they hit hard," muttered Corporal Alvarez, clutching a battered comm unit. "Our boys in orbit never stood a chance." Rook didn't answer. He knelt beside a long, dirt-covered shape, canvas pulled taut over a steel beast that had once screamed across the fields of Iraq, Korea, and countless Earthborn wars. He ripped the cover off. The M198 howitzer stood like a slumbering dragon, worn but intact. "You sure about this, Sarge?" Alvarez asked. Rook ran a hand along the barrel. "Oh yeah. She's too old to know fear, and too stubborn to die." He motioned to the crew. "Dig in. We'll sight her by hand. We'll load her ourselves. If this planet's going down, we'll make damn sure they remember who held the line." The Threx troops hit the first firebase with precision. Energy bolts carved into bunkers, and plasma drones cleared trenches in synchronized waves. When the last human transmission ceased, they moved on, certain of victory. But they hadn't counted on the second line. At Firebase Echo, the old howitzer crouched behind earthworks reinforced with scrap metal and stone. No shield matrix. No AI. Just human muscle and will. The Threx commander, Exarch Veltrin, watched through orbital sensors. Why do they resist? Why bother? His aide flicked a claw. Primitive defiance. Ineffective. Veltrin leaned forward. "Wait. What is?" From the hillside, a plume of smoke erupted. Seconds later, An explosion tore through a dropship before it touched down. The shockwave toppled 2 mechs and shredded 3 scout drones. Veltrin blinked his multiple eyes. "No energy signature," the aide said, stunned. "No warning." Another round fired, then another. Each was followed by a thunderous, brutally physical impact. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't refined. But it worked. They tried jamming, useless. The howitzer didn't need uplinks. They tried targeting, futile. The humans moved it between shots, dragging it with ancient gears and grit. And it roared. Every 10 seconds. Unrelenting. Inside the fire control pit, Rook's voice was hoarse from shouting. "Round up! Fire!" The earth shook with each blast. Sweat poured down Alvarez's face as he loaded shell after shell, arms burning. A young spotter called from a vantage point. "Sarge! They're falling back." Rook didn't smile. He adjusted the sight. "Let them. They need to learn. We don't stop just because they turn around." Orbiting above Altair 9, Veltrin paced in disbelief. "What is this weapon?" he snarled. The science officer reviewed the footage. "Simple ballistic cannon. World War era. They are manually calculating trajectory and manually firing." Veltrin's voice trembled. "But it's cutting through our armor." "Yes," the officer said. "Because physics doesn't care how advanced we are. Kinetic force is universal." Veltrin turned to his fleet. "Order a retreat. We'll bombard the colony from orbit. If we can't land, we'll erase them from above." Then the comms crackled. A voice. Human. Gruff. "This is Sergeant Rook of Firebase Echo. You want to talk surrender? You can surrender to my howitzer. Otherwise, keep coming. We've got shells for days." Artillery doctrine. The Threx Dominion's high-orbit ships began recalibrating for precision orbital strikes. Massive energy capacitors hummed. Bombardment vectors were locked in. Veltrin stood tall on the bridge of the Vorakthel, smugness returning. Let them hide behind their relics. We'll turn the ground to glass. But then the Vorakthel shuddered. Alarms blared. "Impact on Deck 12, a voice screeched. "Hull breach, no energy readings, just metal." "What?" Veltrin barked. The sensor officer turned pale under his scaled dermis. "Sir, it was a shell. A physical shell. Fired from the surface." Veltrin stared at him. "You're saying they've elevated the cannon? They're firing at us from the ground?" He nearly laughed. "Until the second shell hit. This one didn't breach, but it knocked out their sensor array. Then a third. This time, the mess hall vanished into vacuum." Back on Altair 9, Firebase Echo was shaking with thunder. Rook had rigged the old howitzer onto a makeshift elevation rail, scrap steel from downed mechs. The barrel now pointed skyward. Alvarez loaded the next round with bleeding hands. "Sarge, this isn't a flak gun. We're not even supposed to fire this vertically." Rook grinned, smoke curling from his lips. "You see a flak gun around here, Alvarez?" "No, Sarge." "Then it's a flak gun now." He jammed the fire lever. The howitzer roared again, belching smoke and fury. High above, another Threx cruiser banked hard to avoid the screaming shell, and failed. A direct hit smashed into the aft engine. The cruiser spiraled out of control, cutting a fiery scar across the sky as it fell. Cheers erupted from the firebase. The Threx High Command was in chaos. Veltrin had transmitted live footage of Earth's analog weapons tearing through their fleet. The other admirals demanded answers. "This is not war," one hissed. "It is savagery." "No," Veltrin replied grimly. "It is doctrine. Earth's doctrine." They had laughed at the idea of kinetic dominance, that ancient Earth term. But now, even in retreat, human shells followed them. Terrain-based trajectories had been calculated in advance, slaved to nothing but math, fire tables, and sheer human resolve. Even their stealth drop pods couldn't survive the blind fire zones laid out with old-fashioned compasses and chalk. Human artillery doctrine wasn't elegant. It was relentless. 3 days later, the Threx launched a ground counteroffensive. They landed behind the firebase, trying to flank the humans. Rook saw them coming. They think we're a bunker. But we're not a wall. He tapped the side of the howitzer. We're a hammer. He and Alvarez rotated the gun, dragging it manually across its mount. There was no AI targeting, only scopes, muscle, and memory. The first shell landed right in the middle of the alien ranks. The second broke their heavy unit line. The third scattered the remaining troops in panic. No drones. No satellites. Just range tables scratched into Rook's helmet. At the edge of the battlefield, a Threx war leader stumbled through the wreckage. His armor was blackened, his claws gone. Around him, smoking shell craters littered the once pristine alien camp. A human stood in front of him, small, scarred, wearing a flak jacket with the letters Artech stenciled crudely on the front. In the human's hands was a targeting scope, and on his back, a hand-cranked comm unit. "You underestimated us," the human said flatly. The Threx coughed blood. "You used toys. And broke us." "No," the human corrected. "We used tools. Yours broke because you thought war had changed." He turned and walked away. Behind him, the howitzer thundered one last time, shattering the last retreating shuttle. Epilogue: a seat at the table. Months later, the Galactic Alliance reconvened. The Threx Dominion's ambassador sat in silence, appendages twitching. Ambassador Lin of Earth stood once again in the central chamber. No one laughed this time. "The M198 is over a century old," Lin said. "It was designed before your species even discovered the wheel." He gestured to the hologram behind him, a slow-motion replay of the howitzer firing, a column of fire erupting, a warship breaking apart. "We do not wage war because we enjoy it. But we understand it." He looked directly at the Threx. "When we fight, we do not need permission. We do not need elegance. We need only will, knowledge, and the tools to make them real." Silence. Then, slowly, the Threx ambassador bowed his head. The seat labeled Earth was no longer empty.